I'd like to consider organizations as systems, systems that allow them to exist in a given environment, and use that view of a system to think about where the firm might strive to create a competitive advantage. So to start this thought process, let's take a look at organizations as systems and recognize that pretty much any organization, whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit organization delivering a product or a service, exists to be able to deliver something to the environment or outputs that are somehow valued by members of the environment. And in fact, cannot be created at least as efficiently by members of the environment. Therefore, it gives the organization room to exist as a firm by gathering inputs from the environment, doing whatever it is that they do particularly well to convert those inputs into outputs, again, that are valued by members of the environment. And we know that to the extent a group of firms are all trying to produce relatively similar outputs, or what we might call close substitutes for one another, that would be an industry. And so we can see a number of companies taking roughly the same approach in terms of the outputs they're producing, and it suggests they may indeed be taking fairly similar conversion processes and using much the same inputs. And it begs the question as to how we can begin to create an advantage relative to the other members of our industry. So if we think of inputs, all the firms are trying to gather what we might call the factors of production from its environment. So that would be typically materials and labor, or we can think of materials that are in the form of subassemblies or parts. And then we need the basic fuel, if you will, for our process. So heat, light, power, water, those types of utilities that might be needed in the process. And then we engage in an activity that gathers up those inputs and puts them into some attempt to convert them into another type of product. So we can think of technology that we use in terms of machinery, or machinery housed in particular format of plant and equipment, or specific processes, assembly lines, or batch processes that we might use specifically to convert those materials. That would be the conversion function. And of course, our intent is to produce products, again, that are valued by members of a given environment. But we have to make sure they're aware of our product and can make a decision as to how much they value those products, that output. And so we would engage in things like marketing, sales, distribution channel maintenance and development, service, and support of the product. And so we look at pretty much any organization and recognize that they're engaging in this system of gathering things from the environment, converting them into something else that we hope is valued, outputs that are demanded by members of that environment. And that value is a key term because it presumes that they will give us something of value in return for that output. Now, in order to get that accomplished, our firm has to move things through this system. It has to get from the input stage, ultimately, to be staged for customers to purchase it and be able to have it serviced. And so that becomes the linkage, if you will, of our system, and we might call that the logistics process associated with the firm. So in the creation, ultimately, of our value, we're going to have to come up with dollars to purchase inputs, dollars to invest in conversion, dollars to help sell the product, and then commit resources, dollars, to fund the process within which our product moves, or logistics. If we do it right, our environment will value that product and give us a return. And of course, we hope that they place a value on our output that's greater than the sum of the costs of inputs, conversion, outputs, and logistics. And that's how we would generate a profit. And if we think of this in a for-profit environment, we may be fortunate enough to have enough money ourselves to purchase the inputs. And if we do generate enough money when we sell the product, in a sense, this system will replenish itself. It will just begin to replicate as we invest in inputs, conversion, logistics, and selling our product. And then we'll get more value back from our customers and begin to just fund the system. That's the idea of a system. On the other hand, we typically, though, find that companies at least need to raise capital to prime the system to get it started, or to increase the system beyond what our outputs will allow us to do. And so we may bring in another realm here where we have to raise capital But that means some of the value we get from our customers needs to be spun back to the capital providers, what we might consider return on capital. If we were doing this in a nonprofit environment, we would probably use different terms. We wouldn't consider it capital that's being provided. Some suggest that that is the equivalent of resources provided by our authorizing environment. Stakeholders in our environment that expect a product or service to be delivered by our company, and to the extent we deliver it to their expectations, they'll continue to provide additional resources for us. However we look at it, it represents the need to generate resources from outside the system itself. And since it is related specifically to our industry, we can think of that as being another source of revenues within the system. Now, the interesting part for us is that allows us to begin to think of our competitive process as really having some identifiable realms of competition within which we can think about trying to perform those activities better than our competitors. And to the extent we can perform them better than our competitors, i.e. purchase materials at a lower cost, convert them more efficiently, sell for a higher price, that might give us the basis upon which we can generate superior profits. Or we might think of that, therefore, as our ability to generate a competitive advantage. So, our first realm of competition might be inputs. We might find a way, if we're a cost leader, to buy our products in bulk, therefore driving down the average cost of our inputs. Or perhaps we buy a better quality input to support a differentiation strategy better than our competitors. Perhaps we find a way to become more efficient by investing in technology that our competitors do not have. Perhaps robotics as opposed to a human component of manufacturing, and therefore we get a more reliable conversion process, driving down our costs, winning our competitive advantage by having a better or more efficient conversion process. It could be that we're better at advertising, or we develop specific skills in marketing that allow us to price, promote, and position our product better than our competitors. So that even if our costs are similar for inputs or conversion, we're better at identifying and selling to a broader and deeper base of demand for our product. So perhaps outputs becomes a realm of competition. It might be that we focus on the efficiency of the movement of goods and products through our system, and so logistics becomes a way that we try and drive down our costs or increase our efficiency relative to our competitors. It also may be the case that even if we do the other four areas, inputs, conversion, outputs, and logistics, just the same as our competitors, perhaps we're better at acquiring a more efficient capital structure. Perhaps we're able to acquire some debt financing at low interest rates relative to our competitors. Or perhaps because we do the other four realms more efficiently than our competitors, we've reduced the risk profile of our firm, and so the capital providers are willing to expect a lower return. Either way, we might think of the ability to raise capital as another realm of competition, our fifth realm of competition, where we might have a lower cost of capital than our competitors. And so therefore, all other things equal, we have to spend less money out of the system to replenish our capital providers, giving us our competitive advantage. And the point of the argument becomes the following. All firms have to provide an output that is valued by their environment, or they will not have a reason to exist. To the extent we can provide that valued output more efficiently than our competitors, and read that as perhaps lower cost than our competitors, or at least on the basis of fewer resources relative to the value of the output, that's what creates more profits than our competitors. That's what comprises our idea of a competitive advantage. The other side of the coin is that to the extent we can set the system up and organize it in a way that it repeats itself or is able to adapt changes to the environment, it gives us the advantage of being able to not only create a competitive advantage, but to repeat that performance over time. And that is what transitions us from a mere competitive advantage to the holy grail of a sustainable competitive advantage. So we see, guys, then a systems view of the firm, gathering inputs, converting it into outputs in some way that pleases capital providers or our authorizing environment, and provides us thereby 5 realms: inputs, conversion, outputs, logistics, or the return to capital or our authorizing environment, to give us an opportunity to secure a competitive advantage.